There's an hour in this business, right around 1 a.m., that I call the ghost hour. The last of the rowdy crowd has stumbled out into the night. The jukebox is fallen silent, and the only light comes from the neon beer sign humming in the window. It's when the quiet ones are left, the ones who aren't drinking to celebrate, but to contemplate. The air gets heavy, thick with the smell of old wood, spilled whiskey, and the ghosts of 1,000 confessions. It was in an hour just like that when a young guy, I'll call Liam, slid onto a stool at the far end of the bar. He looked like he'd been wrestling with an angel and lost. He didn't say a word, just stared at the grain of the wood and held up 2 fingers. I poured him a double bourbon, neat, and set it on a coaster in front of him. He gave a tiny, almost imperceptible nod, but made no move to drink it. He just stared into that amber abyss like it was a crystal ball. I know that look. It's the face of a man trapped on a bridge with both ends on fire. There's nothing you can say, so you just do your job. I polished a few glasses, restocked the bitters, created a small circle of quiet industry around him. Here, you learn that silence is a language all its own. Sometimes, just being a quiet witness is the most you can do for a person. I think a full 15 minutes passed before he finally spoke, his voice a dry rasp that scratched the quiet air. "Tell me something, old man," he began, his eyes still glued to the glass. "Is it possible to be a monster when all you're trying to do is give your son a name?" The question was simple on the surface, but in my line of work, you learn that the simplest questions are usually the tips of the most colossal icebergs. He started to talk, and at first, the story was warm, golden. He and his wife, Chloe, were expecting their first kid, a boy. The way he spoke about it, you could tell this was the great adventure of their lives. He painted a picture of their small apartment, bathed in afternoon light, the 2 of them covered in pale blue paint, laughing as they tried to assemble a crib with the instructions printed in broken English. He talked about Chloe reading chapters of The Hobbit to her growing belly every night, her voice a soft murmur in the dark. They were a self-contained universe of 2, about to become 3. They were invincible. Or so they believed. The crack in their universe started, as it so often does, with a trip into the past. They were looking for a name, not something trendy like Braden or Caden. It would sound dated in a decade, but something with roots, something with substance. One drizzly Saturday, they were helping his grandmother clear out some boxes from her attic. The air up there was thick with the scent of cedar and time itself. In a heavy, leather-bound photo album with brittle, yellowed pages, Chloe found it. A photograph, stiff with age. A young boy, maybe 7, in wool shorts and neatly combed hair, looking at the camera with an impossibly serious gaze for a child. He was standing by a lake, and the water behind him was dark and still. The caption, written in a graceful Lupin script, said, "Theodore, summer of 1958. Liam had never heard of any Theodore in the family. He'd memorized the family tree for a school project once, and that name wasn't on it. But the name itself, it resonated with both of them instantly. Theodore. It sounded solid, presidential even. It felt, he said, like fate, a sign from the universe. They would rescue this forgotten boy's name from oblivion and give it a new, happy life. It felt more than just a choice. It felt like a calling, a beautiful, secret tribute. They shared a look over the dusty album, and in that silent glance, their son was named. They were so high on the poetry of it all. A week later was the big Sunday dinner. The whole clan was crammed into his grandmother Eleanor's house. The place was humming with the energy of a dozen conversations, the clatter of forks, the smell of roasted chicken and rosemary. Liam waited until everyone was settled with a slice of apple pie. He tapped his glass with a fork, the sound cutting through the happy chaos. He pulled Chloe a little closer, beaming. "Everyone," he announced, his voice full of a pride that was almost painful to remember. "We have something special to share. We've chosen a name for our son. He's gonna be Theodore." And just like that, the universe cracked wide open. The laughter, the conversations, the life in the room, it didn't just fade. It was extinguished, sucked into a vacuum. In the ringing silence, the loud ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall sounded like a bomb. Every single person at that table, Liam said, slowly turned their head to look at the matriarch at the head of the table, his grandmother, Eleanor. Her face, usually a road map of cheerful wrinkles, had gone chalk white. Her fork, laden with pie, was frozen in midair. She slowly, so slowly, lifted her eyes to meet his, and the look in them was not anger or sadness. It was pure, undiluted horror. The look you'd give if you saw a ghost walk through the wall. And she, so slowly, whispered. "No," she whispered, a sound so faint it was barely there, but it ripped through the room like a gunshot. "You will not use that name." The story that followed was a family tragedy so profound it had been deliberately buried for 65 years. Theodore was her younger brother, the serious-eyed boy from the photo. In that summer of 1958, during a family picnic at that very lake, he had waded out too far. He slipped under the dark water and never came back up. He was 7 years old. The grief, Liam explained, it shattered the family. It was a wound so deep that the only way they knew how to deal with it was to pretend it never happened. They packed away his things, took down his pictures, and most importantly, they buried his name along with his body. It became the great unspoken rule: you do not say the name Theodore. And now her own grandson, out of love and ignorance, was not just saying the name, he was trying to bring it back to life. That night, long after everyone had made awkward excuses and left, Liam stayed. He found Eleanor in the darkened living room, just rocking in her old chair, staring out the window. He tried to reason with her. He knelt by her chair, his voice cracking with emotion, explaining that they didn't know, that their intentions were pure, a tribute. "Grandma, we wanted to honor him. We want to give his name a new story, a happy one. Your great-grandson will bring joy back to his name." She turned to him, and her eyes were ancient. "Joy?" she said, her voice hollowed out by a lifetime of grief. "You think a name is just a sound? That name isn't a sound, Liam. It's the feeling of cold mud between my toes as I searched for him. It's the sound of my mother's scream when they pulled his little body from the water. It's the silence at every Christmas dinner where he should have been. You're not bringing joy back to anything. You're asking me to live inside my worst memory every single day. You're asking me to look at my great-grandson and see a ghost." The family, predictably, became a war zone. The older generation, his aunts and uncles who remembered the aftermath, called him relentlessly. They accused him of being cruel, selfish, and blind to a pain he couldn't possibly comprehend. But his cousins, the younger ones, formed a different front. They sent texts of support. "This is your family, your child," one wrote. "You can't let a tragedy from the 1950s dictate your life. That's not fair to you or Chloe or your son." And Chloe, his strong, logical, loving Chloe. For her, the issue crystallized. It ceased to be about a name and became a battle for their future. She came from a family where her mother had dictated every choice, her major in college, her friends, even the color of her prom dress. She had fought tooth and nail for her own autonomy. He saw her point. He saw the future she was afraid of. A future where every major decision had to be vetted by a committee of grieving relatives. He saw her point. He saw the future she was afraid of. A future where every major decision had to be vetted by a committee of grieving relatives. The pressure campaign escalated. Eleanor made one final devastating call. There were no tears this time. Her voice was cold, brittle, and terribly calm. The calm of a final decision. "Liam," she said, "I have loved you more than my own life since the day you were born. But I cannot do this. I will not. If you put that name on your son's birth certificate, I will not come to the hospital. I will never set foot in your house, and I will never, ever hold him. You will have your son, and I pray he is happy. But I will not have a great-grandson." And then she hung up, not with a bang, but with a quiet, final click. Liam finally picked up the bourbon and drained half the glass in one long, ragged swallow. The silence in the bar settled back in around us. "Chloe calls it emotional blackmail," he said, staring at his reflection in the bar mirror. "And she's right, it is. But that doesn't make the pain behind it any less real. It's a wound that has been festering for over 60 years, and I'm the one twisting the knife." "For what?" He slammed the glass down, a sharp crack against the wood. "For a collection of syllables? For a name we just happen to like? What's the right thing to do? Do I betray my wife and the family we're supposed to be building? Or do I betray the woman who raised me and condemn her to a lonely old age, all because I'm too stubborn to pick another name?
There is no good choice here. It's just a question of who I hurt more.
He looked at me then, his eyes pleading for an answer I didn't have. What do you say to that? What wisdom can you offer a man who's been asked to choose between two different kinds of heartbreak? There are no villains in his story, only victims of time and grief and love itself. So, I'm handing the verdict to you. Was he the bad guy for refusing to let a long-dead tragedy dictate the life of his unborn son? Or was he the asshole for prioritizing his own choice over the profound, lifelong pain of the woman who loved him most? Pull up a stool, pour yourself something strong, and tell me what you would do.